What's up, everybody? This is Chris Rich with Realty. I'm your outside sales manager. Today here I have Marc Jandy. Marc's a good friend of mine. We're going to be talking about insurance and insurance claims and insurance disputes since we just entered the hurricane season. So, Marc, do me a favor, go ahead and introduce yourself to the people. What do you do and who you are?
Excellent. Well, Chris, first of all, thank you for having me over. Good morning, everyone. My name is Marc Jandy. I'm an attorney and co-owner of Insurance Dispute Law Group. We are located in Central Florida in Maitland, which is nearby Orlando. And our firm specializes in representing residential and commercial property owners who have disputes with insurance carriers. So if there's any damage to the home or to the commercial property, the insurance company evaluates the claim and they come with an unfavorable determination, such as denial or low payment. Then people are welcome to have free consultation with our firm so we can determine how we can best assist them and turn the no into a yes. And that's basically what we specialize in the entire state of Florida, by the way, all the way from Key West to Panhandle.
Beautiful. What made you want to get into insurance disputes specifically?
Well, the hurricane season in Florida starts on June 1st, and I was born in June 1st, so I guess it was meant to be. But, more seriously, Chris, as you know, I was born and raised in Poland, and I came to the States in 1999. And I got to tell you that going through the steps of learning English and going through education and then getting work experience, the one thing that I will never forget is how much support and almost cheerleading I've received from the community, from people in the community that I met, from my customers back the days where I used to work at the restaurant. They always supported me and they always wanted me to succeed and offer their help. So when I got, stepped on the ladder a little bit higher and I had the opportunity to practice law, which is supposed to be focused on serving the community, it gave me a great opportunity to give back to the community, to the property owners. When you deal with the insurance companies, it's an individual versus a corporation, right? And being able to step in and help the individual in such challenging times, it gives me a sense of happiness that I can give back for all the support I received when I was younger.
Yeah, and we've had conversations where it's helping people through the process, and a lot of them don't understand. So we'll jump right in. What are some of the issues you're seeing right now as it pertains to insurance in Florida and filing claims when you do have damage to a property?
Mm-hmm. Sure, absolutely. Every day something new. There's countless amount of issues, but definitely more issues than we used to have. So, back to the form of introduction, I've been representing property owners since January of 2015, right? And we had some significant legislative changes in the state of Florida in July of 2021, and then later in December of 2022, which quite frankly make things more difficult. There are a lot of restrictions that didn't exist before. For instance, whether you're aware of the damage to your property or you're not aware of the damage to your property, you only have 1 year to submit the claim from the day of the event. So there's a hailstorm, for instance, you don't have any interior leak, but your roof is damaged. It's always good to have it checked, because if you don't check it for an extended period of time and a year goes by, it may be too late to submit the claim. That restriction didn't exist before. Before we had 2 years, and prior to that, we actually had 5 years, right? So there's more limitations and restrictions, both under the law as well as within the policy period, which, as you know, is the actual contract between the insurer and the insured.
Which I kind of want to touch on that, because a lot of people don't understand some of the nuances with the Florida insurance market. What can out-of-state owners who own properties in Florida, what do they need to know about insurance policies and premiums in Florida, specifically as it pertains to their rental properties?
Sure. And, before I respond to that question, Chris, I want to put a caveat here, right? We are licensed and we practice in the state of Florida. So, I'm not as familiar with insurance law in other states, and certainly I'm not entitled to give people advice on insurance dispute outside of Florida. But that said, obviously we are interested in the subject, being a law firm. And what we are kind of seeing is that Florida insurance policies tend to have more restrictions, more limitations, yet higher premiums, right? And that's one very important thing. But also, what property owners living outside of Florida need to recognize with the rental properties is that the contract policy of insurance has its terms, but those are not all applicable terms. What do I mean by that? Any relevant law to the insurance field is automatically embedded within the policy. Okay, so to understand fully your policy, you not only have to understand the terms of the policy, which are very difficult, but also the laws. So if there is any question that a property owner outside of the state of Florida has, I would strongly suggest that they consult with an attorney that is licensed to practice within the state of Florida because of those nuances, because of those differences between the laws in all particular states.
And we've had conversations, you and I, about, specific policies, what a specific person or owner may be looking for in a policy. And a lot of times we both have talked about it where people think they have coverage they don't, or they're paying for coverage they don't necessarily need or want. So what's your advice to people to make sure that they're getting the coverage they need or want? What would you recommend?
Sure. So first of all, don't hesitate to file a claim if you have legitimate damage, right? People pay the premium for the policy, so when you have the damage, you're supposed to be reimbursed for it, right? But also, if you have any questions, any concerns, feel free to contact our office. Our office number, by the way, is 407-573-5402. And we are happy to provide free of charge consultation. If you don't know if something is covered under the policy or not, feel free to call us. Also, my advice to the property owners when they shop for the insurance policy is to focus on more aspects than just the premium itself. Usually you pay what you get, right? So you receive certain discounts under the policy, and it sounds great because it's a lower premium, but then at the back end, you may have to pay the price for it. And I'll give you an example if you don't mind, if we have time.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of insurance policies in Florida include what's called option to repair. Let's hypothetically say you have damage to your home, and now you have a contractor that you've worked with in the past that you trust, and you want them to rebuild your property. But because there is that right to repair or option to repair clause, the insurance company may appoint their own contractor to fix the damage, taking away that freedom from the property owner to hire whoever they would like, right? And I'm not going to get into details of it, but you can imagine sometimes the work is not done up to the standards, and for much less than it should have been done the right way.
Yeah, I'm actually experiencing that now. We got hit here. There was a small cell that came through a couple of weeks ago, for those of you who don't know, and my rental was hit. I sent my roofer out there that I know and trust, and he said, yeah, there's definitely hail damage. I sent the policy to Mark. He reviewed it. I filed a claim, and I'm actually able to use my roofer in this specific case. But it does vary. My understanding, Mark, it varies carrier to carrier, policy to policy, even. So it's really important to make sure you know what's in your policy, and if you don't, consult the people with your broker and an agent like Mark. So we've talked a little bit before about Citizens and how Citizens is the state-backed carrier. There's about 50 carriers in Florida. From my understanding, Citizens is almost always the cheapest, but a lot of times you're not getting coverage, and those are a lot of the cases you end up fighting. Is that correct?
Well, yes, it is correct. And, sometimes because of limitations in the market and underwriting guidelines of different insurance carriers, people are simply stuck with Citizens, right? At least for some limited period of time. As a form of introduction, Citizen was started by the state in 2002, right? And they cover the properties, but they have a lot of restrictions, a lot of limitations, and a lot of clauses that make things much more difficult than it would be if you were challenging a private carrier in the coverage determination. Again, I like to speak based on examples. Recently, just a few years ago, the state approved Citizens to use what's called DOA arbitration clause. DOA stands for Department of Administrative Hearings. And, it's a state organization. working for a state backed, insurance company, right? And what DOA does, or what citizens can do when there is a dispute, they can kick back that dispute into the DOA arbitration, which makes things very, very challenging. Once again, I'm trying to be as respectful as possible for all involved, including insurance companies. So, if you really want to learn why DOA arbitration program, DOAH, is a challenging restriction on your rights, I encourage everyone to Google that term and see and stay away from it, because your rights to recover will be severely impacted by that process itself.
And then can you kind of explain, there's a deductible and then a hurricane deductible. Can you kind of throw out some key facts about that, what the people need to know, how it pertains to storms, if there is damage versus regular damage, and what they need to do from a documentation perspective?
Sure, absolutely. So we have, like you mentioned, two types of deductible. The regular deductible, which is often, $500, $1,000, $2,500, depending on the policy you agree to have in place. And then we have the hurricane deductible, which almost always, but not always, is percentage based. And most of the time is based between 2 to 10% of your coverage A policy. Giving you an example, if you have property worth $350,000 and you have 2%, then your hurricane deductible is $7,000, right? But I also seen multi-million-dollar properties with 10% hurricane deductible. So imagine the impact of that deductible on the repairs that you need to perform yourself. And we all know that in the state of Florida, by law, you have to contribute your deductible out of pocket, to contribute to the repairs. Now, I will tell you this: hurricane deductible applies from the moment when the National Weather Service announces the first hurricane watch or hurricane warning within the state of Florida. And it doesn't matter if it's in Key West or if it's in Panhandle or if it's in Orlando or anywhere within the state. It basically, once we have a hurricane watch or hurricane warning in effect, it goes for the entire state. And that hurricane deductible is applicable not only through the course of the hurricane watch or hurricane warning, but for 72 hours following the last hurricane warning and hurricane watch within the state of Florida during the hurricane period of time, right? So let's say we have hurricane this season, and for the benefit of all homeowners, I hope we don't, but but let's say we do, and then your property is in Orlando, and then the hurricane is gone, and now it went into Carolinas, and then suddenly we have strong winds 48 hours later. Even though that hurricane is gone, you're still under the watch for the hurricane deductible, unfortunately, because the 72 hours didn't pass by. The only good thing, Chris, about hurricane deductible is that, in a state in Florida where we have a lot of hurricanes, right? If you have two separate events within the same calendar year, from January 1st to December 31st, then the insurance company can only charge you for one hurricane deductible as opposed to two. Best example for it, I believe it was 4 years ago when we had Hurricane Ian and Hurricane Nicole. Mm-hmm. They were, several weeks away from each other. Yes, if people had two claims for Hurricane Ian and for Hurricane Nicole, they only had to be responsible for one hurricane deductible, even though there were two events potentially affecting the properties.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine, their property was on the Gulf. They got like 3 or 4 feet of flood. They started the remediation, and then here came the second hurricane. So I want to switch gears just a little bit. What can we do? You've talked before about property documentation, be able to show the incident date when the damage occurred. And you got to go into that a little bit and how important that is when it comes to litigation side of it.
Sure, absolutely. Essentially, if you don't want to have attorney involved, what can you do to decrease those chances and
yes,
increase the chances of successful coverage, right? we have TV stations, we have radios, we are prepared for those hurricanes, right? Very, very, very rarely it happens that something unexpected comes our way. So utilize the time before the event. The best advice and the most important one is to make sure that you take photographs of the interior and exterior of your property, as many as you can. Most of us have cell phones these days, so it's very simple, easy thing. Take videos. For example, what I do, I go inside of my home and I take the video of interior of my home, including, all my personal assets, whether those are paintings or something valuable to you, to show the good condition of your home inside and out prior to the storm. Now, the storm goes by and you have some damage, unfortunately. The first thing that is the most important is do not delay. Call the insurance company when you have damage right away. You have no idea how many times we've had situations where people said, well, I didn't contact my insurance company right away because I didn't know the extent of the damage. Or, I was worried that maybe my premium would go up. Those are not valid excuses under the law. When there is damage, we, the insureds, have the responsibility to notify the insurance companies promptly. There's no definition of prompt really within the policy, but it's, as soon as practicable, as soon as possible, and let them evaluate that damage to determine the scope of the damage, scope of necessary repairs, the amount for those repairs. Now, simultaneously, after you call the claim, you should, consult with a contractor, general contractor, or maybe if the roof is slightly damaged, only with a licensed roofer, right, of your choice, and you don't have to rush into it. So don't sign any agreement, any paperwork with the first person that comes your way. Just make sure you pick someone that you trust and you want to work with. Let them come in, let them evaluate the damage, and let them prepare the estimate for that damage as well, because then you will have the opportunity to compare the amount of damages estimated by the insurance carrier versus what you're really going to need for those repairs. And that will expedite a dispute that you may have to have with the insurance company. So take photos and videos, but also not only before the event, also after the event. I strongly suggest that you take the same photographs, the same videos to compare the conditions of your home. That would make it easier. If you need emergency repairs, call the insurance company right away. Let them know what the emergency is, why you need those emergency repairs. Take photos, videos. I'm gonna keep saying that over and over again. Get their okay to perform those emergency repairs, and then whatever needs to be repaired, keep the invoices, keep proofs of payments for those necessary repairs, and the damaged portion of your home, ideally, if possible, preserve them. Don't throw them away. Keep them somewhere safe, so then later we can investigate that damage, inspect it, and we can retain professional consultants that will render the opinion as to the nature of the damage if a dispute is needed.
And you mentioned videoing and recording after the hurricane passes. It's my understanding you do that because that kind of takes away the insurance carrier's ability. If something happens down the road unrelated to the hurricane, they may try and say that that was hurricane damage. But if you have that proof that it was not from the hurricane, it makes it a lot harder for them to deny the claim. Is that accurate?
Yes, absolutely. One of the defenses used by the insurance carriers all the time in this type of disputes is that the damage is either pre-existing, right, or it's caused by wear and tear, marring, deterioration, right? And so meaning the condition of the property is something that occurred over time as opposed to as a result of a sudden and accidental event. So by having photographs and videos showing that your property was in a good condition, you take those weapons, those defenses away from the insurance carriers, increasing your chances of successful recovery.
Now, a lot of people feel like just don't know enough about the industry and they have a fear about filing a claim. What would you say to that? You've already kind of touched on it, file it immediately. Is there any adverse effects that can happen if you do file a claim with legitimate purpose?
Well, at the outset, Chris, let me tell you that, we pay the premiums to file those claims when needed, right? So, if you're afraid and if you tell yourself, I will never file a claim, then why have insurance, right? And obviously, if you have mortgage on the property, insurance in the state of Florida is required. So that's a, little different scenario. But you pay for certain services. So when you need those services, they should be expected. As far as the increase of premium, that's what people are afraid. If I file a claim, my premium will go up. The premium will go up for everyone. It's been going up for everyone. It's a natural thing. Unfortunately, and I'm talking about the state of Florida, right? So just be mindful of one thing. If you file a claim and then the insurance company determines that there is damage, and you're not disputing the scope and amount of that damage, and you're okay with it, you agree, you have to perform those repairs, because it is very likely that at some point the underwriting department of the insurance company will look into the claim history, will see that there was a claim filed, will see that they agreed that there was some damage that should have been covered, and they will require you to show proof of the repairs of that damage to keep you insured. But also going back for a moment to those higher premiums, right? So if you file a claim and you're not a serial claimant, okay, if it's not your fourth or fifth time, you shouldn't have to worry about being dropped, renewed or not renewed. I mean, there's never a promise of it, because I don't work for the insurance companies to make those decisions, but it's highly unlikely, and it shouldn't really happen, that they're going to drop you because you filed just one claim. Again, unless they cover it and you don't repair the covered damage. But going back to the premium, say your roof is damaged. Let's say you have a roof that is 14, 15 years old, right? And it sustains damage. Okay, you pay the premium, and now you're thinking, do I file a claim or not? Well, if you don't file a claim, or if they say there is no damage, and you say, okay, well, the insurance company said no damage, there is no dispute. But if they say, yes, there's damage, but it's not repairable, it's repairable, and then your contractor says, well, I can't repair it because it's not repairable, then you're probably not going to repair it, right? And then you're going to be subject to a potential non-renewal because of those non-repairs, unless you replace the roof for out of pocket. Now, I'll tell you this. If the insurance company approves your claim, or if they deny it, and with our assistance, we are able to actually get the money needed for the repairs, less the deductible, you're going to replace the roof, and under almost all, if not all of the policies in Florida, you're going to get certain discount for the age of the roof. So the younger your roof, the lesser the premium, right? So, filing of the claim, legitimate claim, of course, or there is legitimate damage, will not necessarily increase your premium, but potentially down the road may actually decrease it after the repairs are performed.
Yeah, so that kind of going back to something that made me think of it, when I've heard you talk before about don't use the word flood, use water intrusion, because flood is different than water intrusion. And, being careful about what you say. Like, I know when I filed my claim, they recorded my call. They tell me, like, I know that that's used for court. I was very direct, very, basic about what happened. What are some common mistakes you see when people do file claims that maybe they could avoid if they were better informed?
Sure. Well, the terminology is one, right? So don't use the word flood, the water that comes from surface, right? Because that's not covered under a regular homeowners or dwelling policy, rental policy. So, for that, we have separate, policies, flood policies. People often volunteer a lot of information, which, the more you say, the more you have to prove, okay? And I always say that every answer begs two questions. So, just when you are being asked of something, first of all, respond to the question and to the question only.
Yep.
Give yourself
like a deposition.
Absolutely, because it is recorded, right? And give yourself half a second, maybe think about the question before you respond to it. Don't speculate. The insurance companies are notorious on asking you of the date when the loss occurred, on the day when the storm happened. But as I mentioned before, we don't always know right away that there is damage from a storm, right? So do not speculate, do not guess. If you don't know, the answer is you don't know. If you're not sure, you're not sure. You can say, I'm not sure, but I discovered the damage, or I was advised of the damage, or I'm not sure, but my neighbor, my contractor told me that it was about such and such date. So, don't over apply yourself, be truthful. That's always the most important advice that I give people. But also, be truthful and limited in information as to what you're asked for. Now, if it comes out of hand and it's overly intrusive interview, you can always seek legal assistance. For example, under the policies, very often the insurance carriers include a clause that entitles them to what's called examination under oath. It is something entirely different, but in many ways similar to a deposition. Don't be brave enough to expose yourself to examination under oath without proper representation. Okay. And if somebody is subjected to it, and the insurance company is asking for this type of examination, again, call our office at 407-573-5402. We can explain in details what you can expect, what this examination may be about, give you free legal advice, consultation, and then if you determine that it will be wise to obtain our services, we will be happy to assist to the best of our ability.
Well, Mark, we're going to wrap up. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you think is important for the homeowners to know that could help protect them and make sure that if they do have a damage at the property, that they are able to get coverage and their claims won't be denied? Is there anything we didn't talk about that you feel like is important?
No, I think we covered it pretty well, Chris. But I want to emphasize just a couple things. Do not delay. If you have damage, let your insurance company know. Okay. Second, call our office. We are not going to charge you. You're not going to be bound by any contractual agreement if you're just seeking some sort of consultation or advice. And then that may help you to understand your policy, understand your chances, and also establish some connection, give you a little bit of a comfort going through the process itself. That's all I wanted to emphasize at this time. I've shared my office phone number a couple of times, 407-573-5402, but I also wanted to share with all the audience my cell phone number, which is 407-252-0014. So if you feel more comfortable speaking with me directly, please don't hesitate to call.
Awesome, Mark. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me and our clients. Guys, if you ever need any help, Mark's fantastic. He gives you his cell phone. He does answer his cell phone. Don't be afraid to reach out to him, even if you have questions. Mark genuinely loves helping people, and he's there to protect us as homeowners. If we do have damage and we have to fight our insurance, he's there to help you out. So thanks, Mark. I'll see you next time.
Chris, thank you for having me. I appreciate your time. Take care.
Bye.
Bye now.